This weekend, the latest Diary of a Wimpy Kid animated film drops on Disney+. So today we're going to stop and rank all 7 Diary of a Wimpy Kid films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And as we go into a franchise like this is one that I very much watch as a dad. My kids are obsessed with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. They listen to them as they go to bed every single night. They've read every single one of them. And so that's the perspective under which I watch these movies as a dad, connecting with my kids. With that said, let's get started. Last place, The Long Haul. And this is one of these movies where it's tough to know where things went so wrong. It has the same director as the last 2 live action movies in this franchise. Jeff Kinney was one of the screenwriters for the film. It has the same producers that did the previous trilogy of films. But something went totally wrong in the execution on this movie, and the formula did not work here. Now, of course, the movie came out 5 years later, and due to the nature of these films, that meant they had to recast our kids, so they decided to recast everyone. And even on paper, casting Alicia Silverstone, Tom Everett Scott, another member of The Wonders, as the dad, these are good picks, and in certain ways, maybe better picks in the case of Alicia Silverstone for a project like this. But it just felt like with this movie, it was focused so much more on lowbrow, crass humor and less on the awkwardness of adolescence. And so you have them getting a pig that starts pooping inside of their car.
Oh, look how cute. The pig's better potty trained than you, Greg.
We're joking about Greg peeing in bottles and not being potty trained. There's a sequence where he's sitting in a bathroom hearing plops from the person next to him. Just a lot of these just lowbrow, crass jokes without having any sort of heart in the way that the other ones had. Just a lot of nastiness. Our actor playing Roderick doesn't have nearly the right mischievousness to him. It's just not nearly as strong. Kid playing Greg, I think I didn't have any issues with him compared to our previous Greg, but somewhere in here, just it went wrong. It feels unfocused. It doesn't have as clear of a message that Greg's trying to learn, and the humor just feels crass rather than witty, so easily the worst of the bunch. Number 6, Roderick Rules 2022. Now, I'm not an expert on any of this, but my understanding is that with these animated movies, Jeff Kinney wanted to start at the beginning and kind of go through the entire set of books, and thus we're recreating some of the ones that were previously adapted in live action. I can understand the logic there, but with this movie, I just felt it was completely devoid of any creativity. There was just no inspiration here. It has all of the plot beats. It hits the right moments that it's supposed to have, but it doesn't have the charm. It just feels like we're going through the motions, creating content to fill out a streaming service that needs new content every single month. And so we got this cheap rehash of a story that we've already seen before.
Susan! Oh, see, I can't unsee that.
And the novelty of seeing Diary of a Wimpy Kid in animated form, we got it the year before. There's a bit of novelty to that, but it's gone now. So all we're left with is something that we have seen before and much better with a whole lot more charisma and charm to it. Next up, Diary of a Wimpy Kid 2021, the first of the animated adaptations. And because of the nature of the books, seeing them in animated form, there is some novelty to that. There's a certain way in which it's kind of nice to see a fully animated version. There's certain things that you can do in the format that don't translate as well into live action. And so there's a little bit of freshness with the change of format here in animation. It's also a more streamlined version. There's not as many subplots. It's not as long as the live action version. So it kind of focuses in more on some specific things. But with all of that said, the novelty of seeing it in animated form only goes so far.
You almost got the cheese touch.
And finally, don't get the cheese touch.
Fregly.
Wanna see my secret freckle? Wanna see my secret freckle?
And if I'm in the mood to watch Diary of a Wimpy Kid, if my kids are in the mood for it, we always go for the live action version, which just has a bit more energy to it. It has more charm to it. The characters are more layered. The additions work. I like a lot of these little subplots that are in that version. And so it's nice to have gotten to see it once, but that's about as far as my interest in it goes. Number 4, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Christmas Cabin Fever. And I thought this was easily and by far the best of the animated Diary of a Wimpy Kid films. There's a big gap between the bottom 3 and this film. The first reason for that is the obvious one. It's telling a fresh new story that hasn't been told in film before, so it doesn't feel like a rehash. You don't have a live action movie to compare it to. Just stands on its own, in particular for someone like me that has not read the books. But the other big reason for that is that I think the Christmas season, the genre, works well with these types of stories, and Greg, with his hijinks and his selfishness and learning lessons, those two things blend together really nicely to kind of have a cohesive journey for Greg to be on, where he does all the things you want to see him do. He's just as misbehaving, all the shenanigans, but also can have a solid family-based, giving-based Christmas message to send in the story. Right along those exact same lines, I think this one has the softest version of Greg. I mean, at the beginning, he's just as selfish as you expect him to be, but by the end of it, he really seems like he's growing and changing and becoming a better person. And a lot of times in these stories, Greg is a little bit too much for me. And in this one, it's a much more likable version of Greg. There's also just a bunch of little, just memorable things in here with the mom's doll.
Delfriendo is one of Santa's most important scouts.
It's alive!
Them being locked at home. A lot of fun to be had here. So I think this is what I was hoping for from the animated Diary of a Wimpy Kid film. In third place, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, 2010, the original film in the series adapting the original book. Now, a few years back, whenever I first watched these movies and my kids were first getting into them, was when my son was in the 4th grade, right before we started getting into this phase of life. And even as of this most recent rewatch, my son is now in middle school. He's the same age as Greg in the story. And it kind of does give you an entirely different sort of flavor and vibe to watching it, if you're me, as a parent. But what this series and Jeff Kinney does so well is capturing that sense of middle school insecurity and being self-absorbed, just constantly thinking about oneself and thinking everyone else is constantly thinking about you, when quite the opposite is the case. Everyone else is also just thinking about themselves, and it captures that energy really well.
I heard girls say that Bryce Anderson has a cute butt.
There's Bryce. Just be cool. Hey, Bryce.
Yeah, hey, Bryce. Cute butt.
That's also part of what makes this story in particular so frustrating, because Greg is so narcissistic and refuses to accept any responsibility that it just can be a bit much. You just want Greg to be a little bit nicer, a little bit more understanding on these things. And that's, of course, the journey of growth. That's the whole point of all of these. But he's a bit much in this first one. And some of the people are just a little bit too mean-spirited in some of the stuff that kind of goes on in it. But there's just plenty of good family hijinks, funny bits here and there that capture a very awkward phase of life. Our runner-up, Dog Days, the last film in the original trilogy. This time set during summer break, Greg wants to hang out at the country club with Rowley and try and get himself a girlfriend, all the while his dad is trying to spend time with him and connect, and misunderstandings happen all throughout all of it.
Hi, Dad. Hey, Holly.
And I think the reason that I prefer Dog Days to the original Diary of a Wimpy Kid is simply because in the original one, Greg was just too frustrating, in particular in his treatment of Rowley, that just in his perspective of him made him just an unlikable kind of person. You understand it. That was his growing in maturity. But here he's just a little bit more mature, and he still has his faults. He's still selfish. He still lies about some things. But it's in a context where it doesn't have as much of that mean streak to it. He wants to hang out with his friend. He wants a girlfriend. And he's entering that phase of life where hanging out with dad isn't as cool as it used to be. And those are those tensions of life and growing up that you learn to relate differently to your parent or to your child in different ways at different phases of life. And this kind of captures that. And through the misunderstandings, through the camping, through different things that kind of play out, they understand each other better. They connect better. And I liked the way that this one kind of tackled some of the same sort of ideas, but with a much more likable version of Greg. But of course, coming in at number 1, Roderick rules, because Roderick, in fact, does rule. And much like I said with Dog Days, this one continues to have its mischievous streak. It has that adolescent cluelessness to it. You have the lessons that Greg has to learn all along the way, but it just kind of removes enough of that mean streak, makes the characters just a little bit more likable, that it's easier to kind of connect with this story. Also, Roderick is just the most fun character in these movies, and in fact, the actor playing him had such a spark to him that the legend himself, Christopher Nolan, cast him as a scientist. He saw something in him and thought, that guy right there, Roderick, is the guy that's going to invent the atom bomb. But Nolan himself said,
Roderick rules.
Yes, Roderick rules.
Anyway, that's just a rabbit trail there, but I think because Roderick's such a fun character, and this movie is about the friendship forming between the two brothers, while they still have their rivalries, still have their faults, still drive each other crazy, but seeing them work together, care about each other, just has that right family element to it that makes it more enjoyable, fun to watch. And because, once again, Roderick is front and center, you get his shenanigans, you get his band. So there's all these memorable bits in there. So for me, without question, easily, this one comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more incredible content. In fact, YouTube is recommending you watch that video. They use their super AI to look at your viewing history as well as my archive of videos, and they think that is the video that you want to watch. Let me know if that's the case, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.